guys are a formidable audience. I'm humbled to be before you. That video was incredible. Thank you. I want to congratulate the other inductees in this year's class. And I especially, as a photographer myself, want to congratulate Ken because his work is so beautiful. And I used to love to hang out with the photographers in the tennis world. Anyway, my name is Anita Ruthling Klaussen, and I'm Bud's wife. This is an auspicious date, actually. 17 was our lucky number. Bud's birthday is 617. Our area code is 617. Our house is 17, and we were married on the 17th of September. I'd like to thank Ken Agard and the entire group of folks who worked on this evening. I'm especially interested and very happy that the funds are being used for such worthwhile purposes. That story we heard tonight was very moving, and I'm so happy that you all are raising funds like this. Bud would be very honored and very proud to be in the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. I'd like to offer a special thanks to Tennis Channel, who were kindness personified as Bud exited the world of broadcasting due to his illness. The advice Bud would give me in accepting this honor would be, keep it short. I could regale you with tales of Bud's sartorial splendor, but you're all aware of that. However, one slight segue. His beloved tailor, Charlie Davidson of the Andover shop in Harvard Square, who created Bud's signature style, died December 2nd at the age of 93. Bud had various nicknames for Charlie. One of them, Baron of Bespoke, made it into the headlines of Charlie's obit. Nobody used language as creatively as Bud did. And one other small vignette. The folks at Wimbledon called to inquire if I would contribute a pair of trousers to an auction last fall to benefit their inner city program. Of course, I was happy to do so and made up a nice package with a book and a photo of Ken Rosewall with Bud wearing those trousers I had donated. Well, I was pretty astonished when I learned who bought them. A Savile Row tailor who dresses William and Harry. I could tell you all about Bud's love. I could tell you about Bud's love of all sports and his coverage of them. He really covered everything. But his first beat was boxing, which he especially loved. He covered most of Ali's fights. Bud said it was a great sport to write because one could never be libeled. I could tell you about his being an op-ed writer at the Boston Globe, or about being shot during his time covering the war in Vietnam. He went to Vietnam a hawk and returned a committed dove after seeing the fiasco there. I could tell you that Bud described himself as never having worked for a living. He so loved what he did. The babbling and the scribbling, as he put it. Incidentally, he was the first writer to make the leap into broadcasting. His editor at the Boston Globe, the wonderful Tom Winship, was not thrilled. But then he realized what cachet Bud brought to his job and to the paper. I could tell you about the excitement and enthusiasm he brought to the broadcast booth while commentating about his beloved sport of tennis. Bud's reach was far-flung. One year, we were attending Death of a Salesman in Boston. During intermission, as we walked up the aisle, a gentleman asked Bud, "What are you doing here, Bud? There's no tennis being played." Bud responded, "I'm a great admirer of your work, Mr. Miller." Arthur Miller said to him, "I'm a great admirer of your work." I couldn't believe that he was in the audience. Anyway, another time we were returning from a walk when an electrical worker on our street said he had no interest in tennis, but loved listening to Bud's broadcasts. It was one thing for Bud to be revered in the tennis world, but this was different. Bud felt it was his greatest compliment to be listened to and praised by non-tennis folks. I could tell you about his traveling all over the world in the early days with a racket in hand, always ready to play. One of his favorite partners was Luciano Pavarotti, who he said moved quite gracefully considering his girth. Pavarotti loved tennis, Bud loved opera. When in the same city, they exchanged tickets. I could tell you about Bud's prowess in the game. He won a U.S. mixed doubles title in 1961 with Janet Hopps. One year at Wimbledon, he was walking by a practice court in his street clothes, and Andre Agassi was working out. He said to Bud, "What the heck do you know about this game anyway, Bud? Have you ever even held a racket?" So Bud asked to borrow one and served to Andre one of his really wicked sliced balls. Andre got it back, but Bud was at the net and put his return away with a perfect volley. He set the racket down, said, "Thank you, Andre," and walked away. He knew how to play the game. I could tell you about Bud's mentoring of new people in the broadcast booth and in the press rooms of the world. He was endlessly generous in sharing his knowledge. I could tell you how Bud started at WGBH in the early days of public television. Julia Child, there at the same time, told Bud one evening, "You know, Bud, you and I made Channel 2. I could tell you how Bud created the televising of tennis, calling matches alone, start to finish, no commercials, for hours on end. That will never happen again. He used to say that a healthy bladder was essential for a broadcaster. I could tell you if one word could describe Bud, it would be kindness. It has been said that with Bud, there were no B-list friends. They were all A-list. I could tell you about the friendships he made over his 55 years of covering sports. The Aussies considered him one of their own. The Italians loved that he wished he were Italian and always referred to him as Collini. I could tell you about his work for social justice. He had a clear vision of how people, all people, should be embraced. I could tell you about how Bud was Google before there was Google, and how even on deadline, when his colleagues approached asking if he could answer one question, he always replied, "Ask two." I could tell you how Bud was beloved in the world, all over the world. A fan of Bud's recently came up to me and said Bud was a Jedi Knight. I'd never heard that one before. He felt he was a guardian of peace and justice. In conclusion, I will recount one story that truly sums up Bud. On the first day of Wimbledon a few years ago, Bud asked the kid emptying his wastebasket in the press room, "And who are you?" Instead of "What's your name?" That's what Bud always said. "Who are you?" The startled kid told him his name, And from then on, every time he emptied the wastebasket, Bud thanked him by name and asked what he had seen and done so far that day. Had he seen any tennis? What had he done of interest? The exchanges took 15 or 20 seconds, not a huge expenditure of time. At the end of the fortnight, Bud found a note, on his desk. "Dear Mr. Collins," the note said, "you're the first person in my life that has made me feel worthwhile. Thank you. I will never forget you. I will always love Bud dearly, and thank you for this wonderful honor."